You've probably seen this farm behind me. This is probably the most basic create mod crop farm that you can make in the game. We are just using a minecart contraption, a bunch of harvesters, and a little field of wheat. This thing just generates wheat passively and stores it all in here. So this is a pretty simple farm. I don't really have any complaints with it. You can improve it using fertilizer if you're playing with some other mods, and overall it is pretty good. The main issue is that it's slow, and in order to make it faster, you need a ton of space. This thing has been running for hours now, and we only have this much wheat and seeds. So yeah, it's not incredibly fast. And this video is going to fix this problem. I'm going to show you 5 different microfarms for, I think, most of the growable things in the game. So like bamboo, sweet berries, etc. that are quite a bit faster and quite a bit smaller than what you see behind me. All of these do require a lot of bone meal. So if you don't have a bone meal farm, quick plug, check out my bone meal farm video. That's pretty much the same as a vanilla one, but just like way cooler, honestly. But without further ado, let's get to the actual contraptions. These are the 5 contraptions we're going to be going over today. They make bamboo, any seeds, sweet berries, glow berries, and cocoa beans. The cocoa beans are especially cool, but we'll get to how that works shortly. As I mentioned, all these farms require bone meal. They'll be in the creative crates, so if you're pasting in the schematic, you won't have these, but it'll be right where the hopper is going into, so it should be pretty straightforward. They'll also require a power source. Obviously, the faster this is going, the faster these farms work, but especially for the cocoa beans, I recommend that they're all at 256 RPM, or it may not be fast enough. Let's get started with the 2 easiest ones. These are glow berries and sweet berries. Both of these farms work in very similar ways, with the deployer right-clicking bone meal onto the plant. Once that's grown fully, it will automatically drop it off and put it into the hopper or hopper minecart directly below it. I have a built-in on-off switch that, if we fill up, you can see will stop the growing after this deployer uses up all of its bone meal, and similarly for this one, we'll just turn off the deployer immediately. Both of these farms are relatively simple, being 2 wide and 5 blocks long, and stay tuned a little bit later in the video for how to build these if you wish. I'll throw the timestamp on the screen now, but also just check the chapters in the description. Let's move on to probably my favorite and one of the more complicated ones, the cocoa bean farm. This thing as well has an automatic on-off switch that if we fill this thing up, it will stop the bone mealing as is and just cycle around this one cocoa bean. And then the main process is relatively simple. So first we have this downward deployer placing the original cocoa bean. Unlike the glow berries, you can't just right click it with bone meal to create more and more cocoa beans. You need to place it and break it each time. So the bottom one here is placing in the original cocoa bean that you see there. This one is bone mealing it so that it gets into the max size. And then this piston on a loop, it's just a quick timer here that I have set up, breaks the cocoa bean using kind of the vanilla method of just moving the jungle log. If you're in Create 6.0, you can replace this with a pulse repeater, and that will reduce the redstone quite a bit. Otherwise though, it's a pretty simple and compact system at 6 blocks long and only 2 blocks wide. In my opinion, it is probably the best way to automatically harvest cocoa beans, and it is quite fast. In that time talking, we already have a stack and a few. Oh, I did forget to mention that it also auto resupplies the deployer here that is placing in the cocoa beans. That is relatively important. Moving on to the last 2 here. These are actual microfarms and probably more what you consider when you think of a microfarm. We have 3 sets of deployers, bone mealing, this 1 block in here that'll be growing the seeds. We have a little water reservoir in the leaves back here, and bone meal feeding all of these dispensers. We also have this wacky system in the center that, if we slow you down, is harvesters spinning around, and then once the harvesters come around, we'll see that it gets pretty much immediately restocked, but broken by these harvesters. If we speed this up, you can see that it is happening pretty much instantaneously every single time. So it is incredibly fast, and probably my favorite part of this farm, just because it's a fun little combination. We have a portable storage interface here that is reaching through this barrel to the other portable storage interface that we have below it. And since they're directly above each other, normally you would run into issues where the portable storage interface would slow down the farm when it's connecting to a thing. In this case, that doesn't happen since they can always connect, and then we have a funnel dropping it out every time we reach 32 of an item. So you'll see here the wheat is going to come out in a second. There we go. And it gets stored in this barrel. We have the threshold switch running back over to this clock that once it fills up, it will automatically turn off the system. Basically, the exact same contraption is happening over here. We also have an on-off switch, of course, and more importantly, we're doing bamboo, so it can grow to as tall as we want it to, which is why there's no roof on this thing. You can obviously put a roof, that'll just reduce your rates, but not by as much as you think. If we put in a roof here, you can see that it continues trying to bone meal it, so you may lose out on bone meal? Nope, you don't. As you can see, not many bone meal get past this height anyway, so you should be relatively okay height-wise. As I mentioned, this uses a very similar process, but instead of harvesters, we're using saws. Since saws are used to cut down the bone meal here. They're also facing towards where the bone meal is going instead of just connected to the thing like the harvesters are, because for some reason that works better. As I mentioned, it has an on-off switch that if we fill up will automatically turn off the bone meal. This will keep spinning though. And those are the 5 microfarms. Let's get to how to build them. You can either use the schematic that I threw down in the description below, or follow the block by block tutorial. Honestly, it'll probably be just as fast, no matter which way you choose. Wait, before we move on, be sure to subscribe. Like 90% of my viewers are not subscribed, and what's the harm if you keep coming back anyway? But let's get to the block by block tutorials. Now let's start with the sweetberry farm. We're gonna place a shaft and then another one 2 blocks behind it, and connect those two with a belt, hopper going into the front, and a barrel diagonally up from the back with a funnel going into it. We're gonna place a threshold switch right above the barrel here, and we could just keep it as the default. If you want, you can move this around. It doesn't really affect the farm. It's just once it gets too high, it will turn off the farm. Then we're gonna place in a temporary block and place our deployer facing towards the front of the farm where the hopper is, and then we can break that block. We're gonna want a hopper going into the deployer, and this is where we're gonna put in our bone meal source. Next, we're gonna need to get in our hopper minecart. So let's put in a rail and a hopper minecart on top of it, on top of this hopper here. You can then break the rail. We're then going to place in a sticky piston facing downward and a grass block right below it. We're then going to 0-tick this piston to move this block into the hitbox of the hopper. So we're going to place a button on the side of the sticky piston. It does need to be a sticky piston, and that will do it. If that doesn't work for you and it's like moving around and stuff, just place in a bunch of holding blocks for it and then just use a normal piston to push it in, and that should work fine. On top of that, we're placing in our sweetberry, and then we're good. We need to place in a shaft in the middle of this belt here, connect it up with some encased chain drives to the deployer up here, and then we're good. All we need to do is supply it power, make sure it's going the right way. And yeah, that's the farm. We're getting sweetberries in here. Now let's build the glowberry farm. We're gonna start just like we did this one with 3 shafts in the middle here, connecting them all with a belt. On the front side, we're placing a hopper going into the belt. Then we're gonna place in a temporary block and then a block on top. This is where our glowberries are going. In the middle here, we're placing in our deployer. How did it even do that? Okay, no, stop. Okay, we may need to place a temporary block there, and then our deployer facing towards the glowberry. Watcha! We're going to connect up our deployer with 2 gearboxes here. They should both be vertical and connected to each other. And then we're placing in a hopper on the front of it with our bone meal source. On the back side of the farm over here, we're going to place in our output barrel, andesite funnel going into it. And then on this side with the gearboxes, we're going to place in a threshold switch here, redstone dust, redstone dust. The threshold switch here needs to be set to the lowest possible. If you're in the newest version, just set it to 1 item up at the top, 0 items up at the bottom, and the bottom part needs to be powered. And now we just need to power it. Make sure the belt is going the right way, and then we're good. We have our glowberries. Now let's get to building the cocoa bean farm. We're going to start with this part being the front here. So we're going to place in a deployer facing upward, a hopper going into it, and then we're going to place in a shaft to the side and a shaft above this hopper connected with a belt. We're going to place in a depot on the end of this belt, and then a hopper going into it from the top. We're then going to get our output chest, which is going to be a barrel with our andesite funnel facing into it. Next, we're going to get in our bone meal deployer. So we're going to place in a temporary block. I'm using a deployer as the temporary block. We're going to place our deployer here in this little spot facing towards this item hopper. We're going to have hoppers going into the back of it, 2 in total, and this is where our bone meal source is coming in from. We're going to get a threshold switch on top of this item belt, and we're going to need to set it to, again, the lowest possible thing that you can do. If you shift and scroll down up at the top line here, that will do it for you. Make sure the bottom line is set to powered. If you're in the newer version where you have the numbers, just set this to 1 and this to 0, and you should be good. Next, we're going to need to connect all these things together. So first we need to right click this to have it inverted, and then we're going to place a gearbox connecting that to currently nothing, but soon an encased chain drive. That encased chain drive is then going to connect up to the belt which is then going to rotate again, and we can connect another gearbox to connect it up to the deployer here. The final thing we have to do is put in the braking system and I suppose the actual jungle log itself. So we're going to place in our jungle log here and then a sticky piston on top of it. We're going to place a block above the sticky piston, and then we're going to place blocks the entire way along here in a 2x4 area. Right next to the piston here, we're going to place it in a half slab. It should be a top slab. And we're going to place redstone going all the way along the way here. Directly on top of this bone meal spot, we're going to place in a block of redstone with a power latch coming out of it. Then we're going to place in a pulse extender set to just the normal 2 ticks, a pulse repeater set to 28 ticks, and then another pulse extender set to the normal 2 ticks. If you now pass a power source over to this powered latch, it should start the process. You could also just break and replace this block of redstone. That should then start this process here. And if we give this thing power, and I suppose a cocoa bean, I'm just gonna put it in this hopper here, and we should see that this deployer is getting more cocoa beans by the second. Now we're moving on to probably the more difficult ones. Let's start with our wheat one here, because it's a little bit more challenging. We're going to need to break into the floor just a little bit so that we can get in our depots and shafts. And then to the side diagonally upward, we're gonna place in our output barrel with an andesite funnel going into it. We're gonna place it in 2 shafts here, connect them with a belt, and then we're gonna place in our portable storage interface facing upward with a brass funnel coming out of it. Make sure you set this to probably exactly 32. It doesn't have to be that. If you don't want it to, you could do a full stack, you could do less. I just didn't want to have constant wheat flowing out, and it would be at a constant enough flow that we couldn't ever get the seeds out, which could end up being a problem. From there, we're gonna place in a barrel on top of this portable storage interface, and then another portable storage interface facing downward so that it is looking at this one. We're going to place in harvesters on 2 of the 4 sides of the barrel here, and then we need to glue this thing together. To do this, we're just going to glue this barrel here to this portable storage interface, and if, like me, you can't do it for whatever reason and it starts yelling at you, all we have to do is place in a temporary block, glue those 2 together, break that, and replace it in our portable storage interface. Over on this side of the portable storage interface is where we're going to be actually harvesting our seeds, so we're going to place in a grass block there. On all 3 sides of the grass block, we're going to place in dispensers facing towards it, and then directly under this dispenser on the back side, we're going to place in our leaves. It can be any leaf type that you want. We're then going to waterlog these leaves, and then we're going to place in 2 permanent blocks diagonally above these 2 dispensers, and we're going to route this whole thing with redstone. We're going to place in andesite funnels going into all of the dispensers there, and then we're going to grab our shafts and just make belts to supply all of these dispensers with bone meal. It doesn't matter how far or long this is, except that the middle belt needs to be at least 2 in order to make a belt. That's how you do it. So it can be at a minimum 3 blocks long. We're then going to place in our observers for the observer clock. We just have to make sure that both of them are facing towards each other and are looking at each other. And then we can place in our sticky piston. This will be our on-off switch. I'm gonna place a block on top of it with a redstone link set to bone meal on the top and seeds on the bottom. Make sure it's in receive mode. If you right click it with a wrench, that'll switch it up and you should have this little satellite dish around it. On top of this barrel, we should also place in our threshold switch. I'm just setting the settings to the default. It kind of doesn't matter which one you choose. And then we're placing in the opposite redstone link, the sending one, again with bone meal in the red and seeds in the blue, so that this should now power the piston here. Make sure the top one here is set to powered. If the bottom one's set to powered, it will be the opposite of what you want. So if that's the case, just click the invert signal button. And I actually lied to you. We do need to extend these 2 belts by 1, and you might as well do all 3. And then we're going to place in our bone meal source. This may be different for you, so you may need to reroute these things or change it up. But I'm just having a creative crate with funnels dropping out all of the bone meal onto these belts here. Now we need to connect up all of these things together and add in our spinny contraption right there. First, we're going to place in a mechanical bearing, connect it up to this portable storage interface facing downwards, as you see, and we're going to want a gearbox on top of it. Make sure it's a vertical gearbox facing kind of the side where the mechanical harvesters are, and then we're going to connect this with an encased chain drive, rotate the encased chain drive downward so that it looks like this. We're going to place shafts going downward, and then we're going to need to break out some of our ground here and connect this up to a gearbox. And I actually messed this up. We're going to need to extend this belt backwards by 1, place a shaft in the middle of the belt, and actually what we could do, we can just shrink this by 1. I think I might have messed this up. You don't technically need to if you don't want to. If you don't care about the space that it's taken up, then it genuinely doesn't matter. But I'm just going to do that there. And then we need to grab 2 shafts here, connect those with a belt diagonally, and then connect this belt to this one with some encased chain drives. That should now be everything connected. I would recommend before you start it up though, right click on this and switch the movement mode to only place when anchor is destroyed, and that'll just prevent these harvesters from getting in the way of your seeds here. If we grab our power source, you can see that everything is spinning, and we are good to go. Once that's on, you can turn that on successfully. Grab your hoe, grab the thing you want to plant, till the soil, plant that bad boy, and watch the thing run. You should pretty quickly be getting carrots into this barrel, or whatever seed you use. And with that, that one is done. Now let's move on to the final one here. This is very similar to the one we just did, and is honestly, in my opinion, a little bit easier to build. This thing takes up a 3 wide space, unlike the 4 wide that the other one takes up. And let's get started. We're gonna place in our first frontmost middle block. I'm just gonna keep it in line with this, but it really doesn't matter. And that's gonna be the depot over there that is staging the items to get picked up by that funnel into the barrel. We're then gonna build in our barrel here diagonally above with a funnel going into it. We're gonna put in a threshold switch. I just set it to the default. It honestly doesn't matter. And I'm putting a redstone link on top of it. This one I am setting to bone meal on the top and bamboo on the bottom. Behind the depot, we're gonna place in 2 shafts connected with a belt, a portable storage interface facing upward on one of the sides of the belt, and a funnel on the other side going towards the depot here. On top of this portable storage interface, we're placing a barrel, and then place in a temporary block, connect those 2 with glue, break the top temporary block, and replace it with a portable storage interface facing downward. Those 2 will connect once the farm is going. Then we're going to connect up some saws. You may need to switch the direction around depending on which way your thing is spinning, but for now, let's do it this way. So we'll want it facing this way one way, and the inverse in the other direction there, as you can see. And we're expecting it to spin this way and cut the bamboo like that. Directly behind the portable storage interface, we're placing in our grass block. We're gonna need some dispensers, so let's place those in now. They should all be facing towards the grass block. And then we're gonna place in some permanent blocks here in like a little whoop-de-whoop pattern, so that we can place redstone on top of all of those. This is, in the exact same method as this, going to be used to power our dispensers and get them to bone meal the thing. We're gonna get in our observer clock now, so make sure we place in 2 deployers facing one another, and you should see this light up in a pretty consistent clock. Next, we're gonna place in our sticky piston on and off switch. So we're gonna place in some temporary blocks, our sticky piston, a block on top, and a redstone link. This redstone link will want to right click with a wrench so that you get this little disc and it turns into a receiving one. Currently that should be powered since this one is also powered, which is great to see. And if it's not, just make sure that the top lane here is set to powered. You may need to invert the signal to do that. Behind these deployers, we're gonna need to get in our bone meal supplying system. This is gonna go back 3 or 4 blocks in total, depending on where you're starting. 3 from this shaft and 4 from these. And we're gonna connect all of these with belts. We're gonna have andesite funnels going into all of the dispensers. And then we're gonna grab our source for bone meal, place it down, and have brass funnels coming out of all of these because we want the full stacks of bone meal instead of just one at a time, and these things do stacks at a time. We're going to extend one side of this belt here just to connect up with this smaller belt here, and then on this block here we're going to place in our gearbox to go up to get powered to power this mechanical bearing up at the top. Speaking of that mechanical bearing, we do need to place that in, so place it directly above and facing into the portable storage interface down below. We're going to need a gearbox on top, and then an encased chain drive connecting this gearbox to this shaft here, and that should be everything all connected. Once that's connected to power, all we need to do is place in our bamboo and watch this thing go. Oh, one thing I totally forgot, we need to glue the saws. So we need to turn off the power, connect up the glue to both of the saws over on the side here, and you should get this little T pattern of glue. And then I would recommend up at the top here on this mechanical bearing, setting it to only place when anchor is destroyed. Once that's connected to power and going the right way, we should see bamboo being cut. But if that is not the case, and like me, your saws are going in the inverse direction, there are 2 things you can do. You can stop this, reset it so that it always places when stopped, or you can just place in a gearbox right here and it'll invert the direction and then you're good to go. And as you can see, our bamboo is growing like crazy. We are going to have plenty in here in a jiffy. And this farm is done. And those are the 5 micro farms that I wanted to go over in this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like and subscribe because I would appreciate it. And I would check out my Creataholic series if you want to see these used in survival because most of them are in there. But that'll be it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. If you liked it, leave a like, subscribe as I said, and I will see you all in the next one.